Let me ask you something. How many times have you found yourself in the same frustrating situation thinking, why does this keep happening to me? You know what I'm talking about. The same mistake, the same outcome, the same regret. I've been there. I've stood in that exact place, feeling stuck and wondering if I'd ever figure it out. It's like walking into the same wall over and over again, hoping this time it won't hurt. Here's the truth. We all face this. It's not just you. Life has a way of testing us until we learn the lesson. But here's the good news. There's a way out of this cycle. You don't have to keep repeating the same mistakes. You don't have to feel powerless. I've learned this the hard way, and I want to share with you what's worked for me. What's helped me break free from the patterns that kept holding me back. What I've discovered is that most of us aren't even aware of the real reasons behind our mistakes. We react. We make choices in the heat of the moment. We blame others or even blame ourselves without ever stopping to ask the right questions. I get it. It's easier to point fingers or bury our heads in the sand. But let me tell you something. Until you're willing to face yourself, nothing changes. And trust me, facing yourself, that's where the magic begins. One of the most powerful lessons I've learned is that everything starts with awareness. When you start paying attention to your thoughts, your actions, and the patterns that show up in your life, it's like shining a light in a dark room. You can finally see what's been tripping you up all along. That awareness, it's your first step to freedom. But it doesn't stop there. The next step is taking responsibility. And let me be real with you, this part is tough. It's not fun to admit when you've messed up, but it's also the most liberating thing you'll ever do. When you stop blaming the world and start owning your choices, you take your power back. You stop being a victim of your circumstances and start becoming the creator of your life. Now, I'm not saying this is easy. Growth never is. You're going to face challenges. You're going to fall down. But every time you do, you'll get stronger. You'll learn. You'll grow. That's the beauty of it. Mistakes aren't the enemy. They're opportunities. They're the stepping stones that lead you to a better version of yourself. So, if you're ready to break the cycle, to stop letting the same mistakes define you, I want you to know that it's possible. You have the strength within you to change your story. I've seen it happen, not just in my own life, but in the lives of so many others. And now it's your turn. Let's start now, because every moment you wait is another chance to repeat the past. And you deserve better than that. Let's pause for a moment, because what comes next might just be the most important thing you'll ever hear about breaking free from old mistakes. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to move forward effortlessly while you feel like you're running in circles? It's not because they're luckier or more talented. It's because they've mastered something most of us overlook: awareness. The kind of deep, honest self-awareness that uncovers the truth about why we do what we do. This isn't about overthinking or tearing yourself down. It's about shining a light on the hidden parts of yourself that drive your choices, often without you even realizing it. Trust me, the moment you start seeing yourself clearly is the moment your life begins to change. Let me walk you through how I've learned to do this and why it's the most transformative thing you can ever do. When I first started digging into why I kept repeating certain mistakes, I'll admit it wasn't easy. There were moments of frustration, even embarrassment, as I faced truths I didn't want to see. But here's what I realized. Ignoring those truths didn't make them go away. They were still running the show, whether I acknowledged them or not. That's the thing about self-awareness. It's not about perfection, it's about honesty. The kind of honesty that cuts through the excuses and stories we tell ourselves. One of the biggest lessons I've learned is that patterns don't come from nowhere. Every choice, every reaction, every mistake, it all has a root cause. Maybe it's a belief you've carried since childhood, something you picked up from how you were raised or the experiences you've had. Maybe it's a fear of failure or rejection that's been shaping your decisions without you even knowing it. The moment you start looking at your behaviors through this lens, everything begins to make sense. For me, one of the turning points came when I started journaling. Not the kind of journaling where you list what happened in your day, but the kind where you ask yourself hard questions. Questions like, why did I react that way? What was I feeling in that moment? What outcome was I hoping for? At first, it felt awkward, even pointless. But the more I stuck with it, the more I began to notice patterns I hadn't seen before. I remember realizing that I had a tendency to avoid conflict at all costs. On the surface, it seemed like I was being kind or keeping the peace. But when I dug deeper, I saw that it was really about fear. Fear of being disliked, fear of confrontation, fear of saying the wrong thing. That fear was leading me to make choices that didn't serve me, and it was keeping me stuck. The moment I became aware of it, I could start to change it. That's the power of self-awareness. It's not just about noticing what you do. It's about understanding why you do it. And here's the thing. When you approach this with curiosity instead of judgment, it opens up a whole new world of possibilities. You stop beating yourself up for your mistakes and start seeing them as clues. Every misstep becomes a breadcrumb leading you to a deeper understanding of yourself. Now, let me share something that's helped me tremendously: the Stoic practice of self-observation. The Stoics believed that the key to wisdom is knowing yourself. They called this process examining your impressions. It's about catching your thoughts and reactions in real time, like holding them up to a mirror and asking, is this true? Is this helpful? Is this aligned with the person I want to be? This practice is so simple, yet so powerful. Whenever you feel triggered, whether it's anger, frustration, or even excitement, pause. Just pause. Don't act. Don't speak. Don't react. Instead, observe. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Why am I feeling this way? The more you do this, the more you'll start to notice patterns you didn't even know were there. One time I caught myself snapping at someone I care about over something trivial. Normally I would have justified it. I was tired, they were being difficult, it wasn't a big deal. But instead I paused and observed. I asked myself, why did that bother me so much? What was really going on? What I discovered was surprising. It wasn't about them at all. It was about me feeling overwhelmed and not asking for help when I needed it. That moment of awareness changed everything. I apologized, communicated what I was feeling, and took steps to manage my stress better. All because I took the time to observe. Another powerful tool I've found is reflection at the end of the day. Every night, I take a few minutes to look back and ask myself, what went well today? What didn't? Where could I have shown up differently? This isn't about dwelling on mistakes. It's about learning from them. Over time, these small moments of reflection add up. You start to see patterns more clearly, and you start to catch yourself in the moment before repeating the same behaviors. One thing I want to emphasize is that self-awareness isn't a one-time thing. It's not like you wake up one day and suddenly understand everything about yourself. It's a practice, a journey. There will be days when it feels like you're taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and that's okay. What matters is that you keep showing up, keep asking the questions, and keep being honest with yourself. Here's something else to keep in mind. Self-awareness isn't just about the big, obvious mistakes. Sometimes it's the small, subtle patterns that make the biggest difference, like the way you talk to yourself when no one's listening, or the assumptions you make about people's intentions, or the little habits that seem harmless but actually hold you back. When you start paying attention to these details, you'll be amazed at how much clarity you gain. This is why I say self-awareness is the foundation of change, because without it, you're just guessing. You're trying to fix problems without knowing what's causing them. But with it, you have a map. You know where you're starting from, and you know what needs to shift. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this, it's this. You have the power to understand yourself in a way that no one else can. You have the power to break the cycles that have been holding you back. It starts with awareness. It starts with paying attention. It starts with being brave enough to face yourself, even when it's uncomfortable. Because on the other side of that discomfort is freedom. Freedom to grow, freedom to change, and freedom to live the life you truly deserve. Here's the thing. Awareness alone isn't enough. You can't just uncover your patterns and stop there. That's like finding a leak in a boat and deciding to stare at it instead of plugging it up. The next step is where real change happens, and it's the step that most people avoid because it's hard. It requires something uncomfortable but life-changing, taking full responsibility for your actions. When I first started this process, I thought awareness would solve everything. I figured, now that I know what I'm doing wrong, everything will fall into place. But it didn't. I kept slipping back into the same mistakes. Why? Because I hadn't taken ownership of them. I was still blaming other people, circumstances, or even my bad luck. It wasn't until I stopped pointing fingers and started looking in the mirror that things truly began to change. Let me share something that hit me like a ton of bricks. As long as you blame others for your mistakes, you give them control over your life. It's like handing someone else the keys to your car and then wondering why you're not going where you want to go. Taking responsibility is the act of reclaiming those keys. It's saying, this is my life, my choices, and my outcomes, and I have the power to change them. This shift didn't happen overnight for me. There were plenty of times when I wanted to cling to my excuses. Blaming other people felt safer, easier. It gave me an out. But deep down, I knew those excuses were keeping me stuck. Every time I avoided responsibility, I avoided growth. And the more I leaned into this truth, the more I realized how much power I'd been giving away by refusing to own my mistakes. Here's what taking responsibility looks like in action. It means looking at every situation, not just the big obvious ones, and asking yourself, what role did I play here? What could I have done differently? It's not about beating yourself up or dwelling on the past. It's about learning from it. For me, one of the most humbling moments was realizing how often I contributed to conflicts by failing to communicate my needs clearly. I had been blaming others for not understanding me, but the real issue was that I hadn't expressed myself in a way they could understand. Owning that truth was uncomfortable, but it was also liberating because it meant I had the power to change it. This is where the Stoic principle of responsibility becomes so powerful. The Stoics believed that while we can't control what happens to us, we can always control how we respond. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This mindset is a game changer because it shifts the focus from what's outside your control to what's within it. And what's within your control, your choices, your actions, your mindset. One of the biggest barriers to taking responsibility is the fear of failure. I used to think that admitting I'd made a mistake meant I was weak or incapable, but here's what I've learned. Taking responsibility isn't about admitting defeat. It's about claiming your ability to grow. When you own your mistakes, you're not saying, "I failed and that's the end of it." You're saying, "I failed and now I know how to do better next time." That's strength. That's resilience. Let me give you a practical example of how this works. A few years ago, I was in a situation where I missed an important deadline at work. My first instinct was to blame the circumstances. There wasn't enough time. The requirements weren't clear. Other people hadn't done their part. But when I stepped back and asked myself what role I played, I realized there were things I could have done differently. I could have asked for clarification earlier. I could have communicated better with my team. I could have managed my time more effectively. Owning those truths didn't feel great in the moment, but it gave me a roadmap for how to prevent the same mistake in the future. Another powerful aspect of responsibility is the way it transforms your relationships. Think about how it feels when someone refuses to take accountability for their actions. It creates frustration, resentment, even mistrust. Now flip that. When you own your part in a conflict or misstep, it builds trust and respect. I've seen this play out in my own life. The times when I've been willing to say, "You're right, I messed up and I'm going to fix it," have been the times when my relationships have grown stronger. Taking responsibility also frees you from the mental weight of blame. Carrying around resentment, whether it's toward others or yourself, is exhausting. Blame keeps you stuck in the past, replaying the same scenarios over and over. Responsibility, on the other hand, is forward-facing. It says, "What's done is done. Now how do I move forward?" It's not about excusing bad behavior or pretending everything is fine. It's about choosing to focus your energy on solutions instead of problems. One of the most powerful tools I've found for cultivating responsibility is reflection. At the end of each day, I ask myself, what went well today? What didn't? Where did I fall short? And what can I learn from it? This practice isn't about dwelling on mistakes. It's about using them as stepping stones. Over time, this daily habit has helped me see patterns in my behavior and take action to change them. Responsibility also means being honest with yourself about your intentions. Sometimes we make choices that seem logical on the surface, but are rooted in fear, insecurity, or avoidance. I've caught myself doing this more times than I can count. For example, there were moments when I avoided difficult conversations, convincing myself it was for the best, when really I was just afraid of confrontation. Taking responsibility meant acknowledging that fear and choosing to face it anyway. Another aspect of responsibility is understanding that it's not about controlling everything. It's about controlling what you can. There's a subtle but powerful difference between taking responsibility and taking on unnecessary blame. The Stoics were clear on this. Focus on what's within your control and let go of the rest. For me, this has been a lifesaver. It's helped me draw the line between owning my part in a situation and carrying the weight of things that aren't mine to carry. Here's the truth. Responsibility isn't always comfortable, but it's always empowering. It's the bridge between where you are and where you want to be. It's the thing that turns setbacks into comebacks, mistakes into lessons, and challenges into opportunities. When you take responsibility for your actions, you reclaim your power. You stop being a passive participant in your life and start becoming the author of your story. So if you've been stuck in the cycle of blaming others, avoiding accountability, or feeling like life is happening to you instead of for you, let this be the moment you take your power back. Start small. Start by asking yourself, what's one thing I can take responsibility for today? It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be easy. It just has to be honest, because honesty with yourself is where true growth begins. And from there, the possibilities are endless. Let's keep moving forward, step by step. Taking responsibility for your actions is transformative, but there's another layer that often goes unnoticed: your emotional reactions. It's not enough to own your choices if you're still being swept away by emotions in the heat of the moment. This is where many of us stumble, myself included. How often have you reacted impulsively, only to regret it later? A sharp word spoken in anger, a decision made in haste, or a door slammed shut that didn't need to be. These moments are where change truly begins, because controlling your emotional reactions is the key to responding with wisdom instead of regret. One of the hardest lessons I've had to learn is that emotions, while powerful and valid, aren't always reliable guides. They flare up, fueled by frustration, fear, or anger, and push you into action before you've had a chance to think. The Stoics knew this well. They didn't dismiss emotions as irrelevant or weak. Instead, they taught us to master them, to use them as signals rather than instructions. That shift alone has changed how I handle almost everything in my life. When I first started paying attention to my emotional responses, I noticed something surprising. They often weren't about the situation in front of me. If I snapped at someone for interrupting me, it wasn't because of the interruption itself. It was because I felt unheard in 100 other ways that had nothing to do with that moment. Recognizing that was humbling. It forced me to stop blaming others for my reactions and start digging deeper. The Stoics offer a simple but powerful tool for managing emotions: pause. In that brief moment before you react, there's a window, a small but powerful gap where you can choose your response. This doesn't mean suppressing your feelings or pretending they don't exist. It means giving yourself space to think before you act. For me, this practice has been a game changer. The next time someone frustrates you, stop. Take a breath. Ask yourself, what's really going on here? Is this worth the energy I'm about to spend on it? Those few seconds can make all the difference. One time, I was caught in a heated argument that escalated quickly. I felt the rush of anger, the urge to lash out, to win the exchange. But instead of reacting, I paused. I thought about what I wanted to achieve. Was it more important to be right, or to preserve the relationship? That pause allowed me to shift from a reactive state to a thoughtful one. I chose to respond calmly, and the argument de-escalated almost immediately. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Another practice I've found helpful is reframing. Emotions often come from the stories we tell ourselves. If someone cuts you off in traffic, your first thought might be, "They're so disrespectful." That thought fuels your anger. But what if you reframed it? What if you told yourself, maybe they're in a hurry because of an emergency? It doesn't excuse their behavior, but it shifts your perspective and helps you stay calm. I've used this countless times, and it never fails to diffuse the intensity of my emotions. Stoicism also teaches us to focus on what we can control. Emotional reactions often stem from trying to control things that are beyond our reach. When someone criticizes you unfairly, your instinct might be to argue, to convince them they're wrong. But the Stoics remind us that we can't control others' opinions, only our response to them. I've learned that when I let go of trying to control the uncontrollable, my emotional reactions become less intense. Instead of arguing, I focus on what I can control: my behavior, my words, my peace of mind. One of the most practical techniques I've used to transform my reactions is visualization. The Stoics practiced a form of this called premeditatio malorum, imagining potential challenges before they happen. For example, if I know I'm going into a difficult meeting, I take a few minutes to anticipate the emotions I might feel and plan how I'll respond. This isn't about dwelling on negativity, it's about preparing yourself to handle situations with composure. The more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. It's also important to address the physical side of emotions. Emotions aren't just in your mind, they manifest in your body too. When you're angry, your heart races. When you're anxious, your chest tightens. Learning to recognize these physical cues can help you catch an emotional reaction before it takes over. For me, mindful breathing has been a lifesaver. Whenever I feel my emotions rising, I focus on my breath. Deep, slow breaths calm the nervous system and give me a moment to regain control. Another aspect of managing emotional reactions is understanding their root causes. Often, what triggers us in the present has its roots in the past. I've found that journaling helps me uncover these connections. If I overreact to something, I write about it later. I ask myself, what was I really feeling? What does this remind me of? Over time, this practice has helped me identify patterns and address the deeper issues driving my reactions. It's also worth mentioning the role of compassion, not just for others, but for yourself. When you're in the grip of a strong emotion, it's easy to judge yourself harshly. But the truth is, emotions are a natural part of being human. The goal isn't to eliminate them, it's to guide them. I've learned to treat my emotions as signals, not commands. If I'm angry, I ask, what is this anger trying to tell me? If I'm sad, I ask, what do I need right now? This approach has made me more patient with myself and more effective in managing my reactions. One of the most valuable lessons I've learned is that emotional mastery is a skill. It's not something you're born with, it's something you cultivate through practice. The more you work on it, the easier it becomes. At first, pausing before reacting felt awkward, even forced. But now, it's second nature. I still slip up sometimes. We all do. But those moments are fewer and farther between. Another perspective that's helped me is viewing emotional challenges as opportunities. Every time you pause instead of reacting, every time you choose a rational response over an impulsive one, you're building resilience. You're training yourself to handle life's ups and downs with grace. It's like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. Transforming emotional reactions isn't just about personal growth. It's about how you show up in the world. Your ability to manage your emotions affects your relationships, your decisions, and even your health. When you respond thoughtfully, instead of reacting impulsively, you build trust, respect, and stability, not just for yourself, but for those around you. This journey isn't about being perfect. It's about progress. Every time you choose to pause, reflect, and respond with wisdom, you're breaking the cycle of emotional reactivity. And with each step, you're becoming the person you were always meant to be, calm, composed, and in control of your life. Mastering emotional reactions is a life-changing skill, but there's something even deeper that we need to face: the way we handle failure. No matter how composed we are in the moment, life is going to throw us curveballs. We're going to make mistakes, and how we respond to those mistakes determines whether we grow stronger or stay stuck. For the longest time, I saw failure as a dead end. It felt like proof that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't capable. But when I started shifting my perspective, everything changed. Failure wasn't the end, it was a beginning. What if I told you that failure is one of the best teachers you'll ever have? That every mistake, no matter how painful, holds the potential to shape you into someone stronger, wiser, and more resilient. It took me years to realize this, but now I see failure not as something to fear, but as something to embrace. Let me walk you through how I've learned to reframe failure and use it as a stepping stone to growth. One of the first things I had to accept was that failure is inevitable. It's part of life. No one, no matter how skilled, prepared, or determined, gets everything right all the time. For a long time, I resisted this truth. I thought if I worked hard enough or planned perfectly, I could avoid failure. But all that did was make me terrified to take risks. I played it safe, and in doing so, I missed countless opportunities to grow. Accepting the inevitability of failure was liberating. It freed me to try new things, knowing that mistakes weren't the end of the road. They were part of the journey. The Stoics had a powerful way of looking at failure. They saw it not as a setback, but as a tool for self-improvement. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That idea shifted something inside me. Instead of seeing obstacles as things to avoid, I started viewing them as opportunities to learn. If something didn't go as planned, I asked myself, what can this teach me? How can I use this to get better? That mindset turned every failure into a chance to grow. One of the biggest lessons I've learned is that failure isn't personal. It doesn't mean you're flawed or incapable. It's simply feedback. It's life's way of saying, "This didn't work. Try something else." When I stopped taking failure personally, it became easier to analyze it objectively. I could look at what went wrong without beating myself up. I could ask, what was in my control here? What could I do differently next time? That kind of reflection turned failures into stepping stones instead of stumbling blocks. Another thing I've realized is that failure builds resilience. Every time you face a setback and choose to get back up, you're training yourself to be stronger. I think back to times in my life when things fell apart. Failed projects, lost opportunities, broken relationships. In those moments, it felt like the world was ending. But looking back, I see those experiences as the ones that shaped me the most. They taught me grit, patience, and perseverance. Without them, I wouldn't be who I am today. There's also something powerful about embracing vulnerability in the face of failure. For a long time, I thought admitting failure made me weak. I wanted to hide my mistakes, to pretend I had it all together. But when I started being honest about my struggles, both with myself and with others, it opened up a whole new level of connection and growth. I realized that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's strength. It takes courage to say, "I messed up, but I'm going to learn from this." Failure also forces you to reassess your priorities. When something doesn't work out, it pushes you to ask, was this the right path for me? I've had moments where failure revealed that I was chasing something for the wrong reasons: approval, status, or fear of missing out. Those failures were blessings in disguise. They helped me realign with what truly mattered and set me on a path that was more authentic to who I am. One of the most practical tools I've found for reframing failure is gratitude. It might sound strange to be thankful for mistakes, but hear me out. When you approach failure with gratitude, you start to see it as a gift, a chance to grow, to learn, to pivot. I've started asking myself after every setback, what's the silver lining here? What's the lesson I can take away? This practice has helped me move forward with a sense of purpose rather than frustration. Another important aspect of reframing failure is letting go of the fear of judgment. So many of us are paralyzed by the thought of what others will think if we fail. I've been there, afraid to take risks because I didn't want to look foolish or incompetent. But here's the truth. Most people are so focused on their own lives that they're not judging you nearly as harshly as you think. And even if they are, their opinions don't define your worth. When you stop fearing judgment, you free yourself to take bold action and embrace the lessons that come with failure. Failure also teaches humility. It reminds you that you don't know everything, that you're not perfect, and that there's always more to learn. At first, this realization can feel humbling, even uncomfortable. But over time, I've come to see it as a gift. It keeps me grounded and open to new perspectives. It reminds me that growth is a lifelong journey, and there's always room to improve. One of the most profound lessons I've learned from failure is the importance of persistence. There have been times when I wanted to give up, when the weight of repeated setbacks felt unbearable. But looking back, I see that those moments were the ones that tested and strengthened my resolve. They taught me that success isn't about never falling, it's about getting up every time you do. Reframing failure also requires self-compassion. It's easy to be your own worst critic, to spiral into negative self-talk when things go wrong. But beating yourself up doesn't help. What does help is treating yourself with kindness and understanding. I've learned to talk to myself the way I would talk to a friend, acknowledging the mistake, but also recognizing the effort and growth that came from it. Failure is also a reminder that progress isn't linear. Growth is messy. It's full of ups and downs, detours and setbacks, but every step, no matter how small or challenging, moves you forward. I've found that celebrating small wins, even in the midst of failure, helps me stay motivated and focused on the bigger picture. Ultimately, reframing failure is about shifting your mindset from fear to curiosity. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" ask, "What can I learn from this?" Instead of seeing failure as a dead end, see it as a stepping stone. Every mistake is an opportunity to grow, to improve, and to become the person you're meant to be. Failure isn't the enemy. It's a guide, a teacher, and a catalyst for transformation. When you start to see it that way, it loses its power to hold you back. It becomes a tool you can use to move forward with confidence and purpose. Turning failure into a stepping stone is a powerful shift, but there's one crucial element that ties it all together, where you place your focus. It's easy to get stuck replaying past mistakes or worrying about what's ahead, but neither of those places will help you move forward. I've learned that the key to breaking free from those mental traps lies in mastering the present moment. The more you anchor yourself in the now, the more control you have over your choices, and the fewer mistakes you're likely to repeat. For the longest time, I lived in my head. My thoughts were either dragging me backward, replaying what I should have done differently, or catapulting me forward into a future filled with endless what-ifs. I didn't realize how much this constant time travel was robbing me of clarity and peace. When I started learning about Stoicism, one principle stood out to me. Focus on what's in front of you. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, just here and now. It sounded simple, but putting it into practice changed everything. The present moment is where your power lies. It's the only place where you can take action, make decisions, and create change. When you're stuck in the past, you're replaying things you can't change. When you're stuck in the future, you're worrying about things that may never happen. Neither state allows you to be effective. I've been guilty of this so many times, fretting over a mistake I made earlier in the day or spiraling into anxiety about an upcoming challenge. What I've come to realize is that the only way to truly move forward is to focus on what I can do right now. One of the most powerful ways I've learned to stay present is through mindfulness. It doesn't have to be anything complicated. For me, it often starts with my breath. When my mind starts racing, I take a moment to breathe deeply and focus on the sensation of the air entering and leaving my body. It's amazing how something so simple can pull you out of your head and into the present. This small practice has saved me from countless overreactions and missteps. Another thing I've learned is the importance of narrowing your focus. It's easy to get overwhelmed by everything you need to do or fix, but when you try to tackle everything at once, you end up doing nothing well. The Stoics emphasized breaking things down into manageable parts. Marcus Aurelius said, "Don't let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present." That perspective has helped me more times than I can count. Instead of letting a big task or problem paralyze me, I focus on the next small step I can take. Just one step. and then another. Before you know it, you've made real progress. Living in the present also requires letting go of things you can't control. This one was tough for me. I used to spend so much energy trying to anticipate and plan for every possible outcome, thinking I could control the future if I just worked hard enough. But that kind of thinking is a trap. The Stoics teach that while we can prepare and act wisely, the outcome is never fully in our hands. Letting go of that need to control everything has been one of the most freeing lessons of my life. It's not about giving up, it's about trusting yourself to handle whatever comes. Another thing I've discovered is that living in the present doesn't mean ignoring the past or the future. It means approaching them with balance. The past is valuable for learning, and the future is important for planning, but you can't live in either one. I've found that setting aside specific times to reflect on the past or plan for the future helps me stay grounded. For example, I'll journal at the end of the day to reflect on what went well and what I can improve, and I'll spend time on Sundays planning the week ahead. Outside of those moments, I focus on the present. It's a practice, and I'm not perfect at it, but it works. Distractions are one of the biggest obstacles to staying present. We live in a world full of constant notifications, endless scrolling, and a million things competing for our attention. I've had to get intentional about cutting out distractions and creating space for focus. Turning off my phone during important tasks, setting boundaries around when and how I use social media, and creating routines that prioritize what matters. All of these have helped me stay connected to the present moment. I've also learned to reframe how I view challenges. When something difficult arises, it's tempting to wish it away or rush through it. But the Stoics saw challenges as opportunities to practice virtue. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" they would ask, "How can I respond to this with wisdom and courage?" That mindset has helped me approach even the toughest moments with a sense of purpose. When I'm present with a challenge, I can focus on what I can do rather than being consumed by what I can't. Another practice that's helped me is gratitude. When you're truly present, you start to notice the small, beautiful things around you, the warmth of the sun on your skin, the sound of laughter, the feeling of accomplishment after finishing something meaningful. Gratitude pulls you out of worry and regret and anchors you in the now. It's not about ignoring problems, it's about appreciating what's good even in the midst of them. Living in the present also means being fully engaged with the people around you. I've caught myself so many times in conversations where my mind is somewhere else, thinking about what I need to do later or replaying a past interaction. Those moments are missed opportunities for connection. I've started making a conscious effort to really listen, to be there, to give people my full attention. It's not always easy, but it's always worth it. Relationships thrive when you're present. One of the most surprising benefits of mastering the present moment is how much lighter life feels. When you're not carrying the weight of the past or the anxiety of the future, you have more energy, more clarity, and more joy. You start to see things more clearly because you're not clouded by regrets or fears. That clarity helps you make better decisions, avoid repeated mistakes, and move forward with confidence. This practice of staying present is a journey. There are days when I slip up, when my mind races ahead or clings to something from the past. But the beauty of the present moment is that it's always there, waiting for you to return to it. Every time I catch myself drifting and come back to the now, it's like hitting the reset button. I get to start fresh, with a clearer mind and a calmer heart. The more I practice this, the more I realize how much power we have in the present. It's where life happens, it's where growth happens, and it's where we can choose, moment by moment, to create the future we want. Let's stay here, in the now, and take the next step forward together. Breaking the cycle of repeated mistakes is not about perfection, it's about progress. Together, we've uncovered the power of self-awareness, the courage to take responsibility, the strength to transform emotional reactions into rational responses, the wisdom to reframe failure as growth, and the peace that comes from mastering the present moment. These are tools, not just concepts, and they are yours to use every single day. I know this journey isn't always easy. It hasn't been for me either. But I promise you this: every small step you take, every time you choose awareness over autopilot, accountability over blame, or growth over regret, you're building a stronger, wiser version of yourself. You're proving to yourself that you don't have to stay stuck in old patterns. You can rise above them, and that is powerful. Now, here's what I want to know from you. Which lesson resonated with you the most? Was it taking responsibility, mastering your emotions, or maybe something else? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear about your journey and how these ideas are helping you take control of your life. Let's keep this conversation going, because we all have something to learn from each other. And if you found this helpful, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We're building a community of people who are committed to growth, resilience, and living with purpose. Hit that subscribe button and join us for more lessons that inspire change and help you build the life you deserve. You've got this. Let's break the cycle and move forward together. Thank you for being here with me today. I'll see you in the next one. Keep growing.